Go. So yeah, we've just turned on the recording after the introductions, and we'll keep going with sort of the general introduction to the project and general logistics and so on. So we've got 20 minutes left in this call, so we won't be getting into any great detail about things, but we'll at least try and get everyone situated as to what we're trying to do, by when, and so on. So as I said earlier, the work has sort of come out of the American Art Collaborative, but then as part of that work and as part of our work at the Getty and trying to understand the wider ecosystem and work with collaborate with as many people as possible, this is not just something that would work for American art, or only within North America, or only within art museums. We wanted something that we all can implement, regardless of exactly what our collection is and where our institution is based. So we got the approval from higher up the food chain in the Getty to form this group to try to work together to come to consensus around exactly what the data models should look like, such that it meets as many use cases as possible and is at the same time as usable as possible, or as implementable as possible. So we have as you've heard from the introductions, a rich mix of folks, from ontology specialists such as George, through to developers actually working with the data, such as Dan and Ethan, folks who are interested in the openness and understanding what's going on, such as Jeannie, and everything in between. So we hope that while this was a group formed via introductions and reaching out explicitly to people, that we have selected the right people, and as time goes on, as new participants emerge in the community, we will certainly add people as positions change, as requirements or priorities and institutions change. It may be that people also drop out. So we are not trying to be exclusive, we're trying to be productive. In terms of what we are trying to be productive about, or what we're trying to produce, I imagine you all have looked at the Linked Art site. If you haven't, it's linked.art. And we have been working over the past 18 months or so to try and document what we've been doing at the Getty. We want to make that what we are doing as a community, big we. So some of the, I think the top couple of bullet points in the model section, I'm just going to briefly go through because I think they capture pretty succinctly what we're trying to do. So we want a data model or target profile of SightUp CRM for the art domain primarily. So there's other types of museums, and indeed I've had interest from herbaria, from natural history museums as to whether they can participate. And I said, well, we'll get there, but we want to start with art first. So art domain is the first one that we want to tackle. That captures, but as you heard Kristen describing, not just museums. So it's the art domain generally, including archives and libraries and museums and dealers and galleries and auction houses and so forth. So not museums, but art. So we want to capture as much of the information that we know of as possible. So if there's information that we can express as data, we want to be able to capture it. That can also be productively used via easy to implement services. So if it's, regardless of whether we can capture it or not, if it's not easy to implement, then people won't publish it. And if it's not easy to use, then people won't use it. And then people will stop publishing it because they'll be wasting their resources. So if you've heard me talking over the last couple of years at a conference, it's almost certainly been about the usability of linked open data. And we definitely want to focus on that aspect in this work. Provides interoperability with other related data sets. So we don't want to be exclusive. We want to be able to link to AAAF manifests. We want to be able to refer to schema.org descriptions and so forth. And perhaps most importantly, it needs to solve real challenges that are documented as use cases. So if we're not solving a real issue, we're just sort of ontologizing and philosophizing for the fun of it, if that's what you think of as fun, then we're not going to be productive, and the result is not going to be something that people can easily understand and implement. And so that's what we're looking for. That's sort of we're trying to find the fine line between capturing as much information as possible while still being useful and easy to implement across multiple organizations in the same way. And then the second set of 4 bullets, we think that successful models are developed iteratively. In other words, we're not going to get it right the first time or the second time or the third time. As more information becomes available, as we discuss more options and more use cases, we'll go back and we'll try to fix things and make it as good as we can. Responsively, so we're not just going to change the model for no reason. We'll change things in response to feedback and concerns and new use cases. So we respond to issues rather than just philosophizing. So responsibly, so we'll consider the changes and features pretty carefully as to whether the complexity that they add is justified by the value that they add. So if only one institution really needs a particular feature, well, then maybe we don't add it because the value is only for one institution. If everyone needs it, then clearly we'll work to make sure that it's a core part of the model. And of course, collaboratively. So here we are. We are all in this together, and we want to make sure that it works for everyone, projects, individuals, museums or archives, etc., etc. So that's what we want to do over the next. Well, we'll talk about timelines, but over the next 12 to 24 months via bi-weekly calls, and now we'll get into some of the questions. So this time slot was the best for everyone, or as many people as possible, from the Doodle poll. So I suggest that we stick with it and have a call every 2 weeks. Does that seem like the right cadence to folks? Or is that, let me rephrase. Does anyone think that that is not often enough or too often?
It's not too often.
Yes, I would have pushed back if anyone had said it was either far not often enough or far too often. And yes, Dave, for an hour. So from 8 until 9 Pacific, 11 till noon Eastern, 4 to 5 UK, and 5 to 6 Europe.
And we can always change it if we feel it is too often or too correct.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it could be that we start off at 2 weeks. Maybe there's something that we want to really hammer out, and we do it every week for a little bit. Or if things are slowing down, then maybe we only need to meet once a month. Yeah, we can certainly adjust things as we go. Communication channels. Given, and this is going to be another question. So, given that we want to not be just an exclusive invited only club, I hope that we can have our offline discussions on the public mailing list. So we have 3 communication channels. So there's a Google group, there is a Slack for sort of more real-time discussion. There's a GitHub repository for tracking specific issues. My proposal, based on what we've done in the IIIF space, would be that we should use the mailing list as much as possible for discussion. So if we're talking about a use case or whatever, then we do it there, and we'll send the notes of the calls to that mailing list for people to keep track of. That we track the actual modeling or technical issues in GitHub, because then we can close them over time as we resolve them and document them. And that we use Slack more for real-time chat to sort of come to understand things, or if there's a particular question. But given that not everyone is on Slack at any time, and that there's no current way that we know of archiving Slack in a reasonable public way without paying for commercial level Slack. So I would, at least for now, prefer to keep the usage of Slack down to just questions and chatting rather than technical discussions. So is that, and thank you for putting in the links into the notes for those. Does that work for everyone?
Rob, where is the Slack? Sorry, because I've not seen that.
It is linkedart.slack.com. I can send you an invite to it.
Yes, please.
Yep.
Cheers.
Of course. And if anyone else is not on the Google group or in the Slack, the links are in the notes. Place the oh yes, sorry. For people who joined the link to the notes into the chat again. There we go. Okay. Perfect. So, look, given the time, I do want to briefly have people talk through the grant situation. So that seems like enough general logistics. We have some things to go on with. And again, we can always revise. So grants. Last year, we talked with Max Barber of the Crest Foundation and asked to see if they would be interested in funding, giving us a little bit of funding to pay for other people's travel. So Max was very supportive of that. The Crest likes to fund international collaboration, and that's, we fit the bill pretty precisely for that. However, they're not a big foundation. They're not Mellon or the Getty. So we have enough money to provide some incentive travel for a few people, and to provide hopefully enough or close to enough to pay for a couple of people. So the folks who are getting the not quite but close to full travel and board from institutions that really can't afford to pay, or are earlier on in their careers, and hence don't have the sort of standing within the organisation to get the funding on a recurring basis. So it's we've tried in the invites to invite organisations that can pay their own way, Oxford and the Met and MoMA and the Getty and Princeton, etc. None of us are particularly hard pressed for something that, if this is a core piece of work that we are doing as an institution, then a travel or two a year isn't going to break the bank, compared to smaller museums that just would not be able to participate. So while it seems a little bit exclusive, we're very aware of that, and we want to be productive. So that's why we got this additional top-up money from Crest to try and do that. So that is a one-year grant for $16,000. Max has said that, assuming everything goes well, and we have no reason to believe that it won't, they will give us a second grant next year for another $16,000, or we can ask for more if there's rationale. The issue is we want it to fit in under their cap before it goes to their board, and that's 20 or 25,000. So by doing it 2 one-year blocks, we're sort of sliding in under that that limit. Sammy, could you give us a brief rundown of the situation with the Mellon and the AAC?
Yeah.
And I'll take
yeah. So to continue the work of the American Art Collaborative, the group had identified, particularly with Eleanor Fink leading as project manager, that Newfields could submit the application, since the primary applicant needed to be an institution, a museum. And Newfields Lab was in a unique position, not just as an in-house group of designers, developers for the museum community, but we also did external work, so we could provide these services at the end of a grant. So that was the whole impetus, was to develop linked data services, from data mapping and modeling, reconciliation, and then publishing and hosting. And then at the end of the proposed 2-year grant timeline, to continue to provide those services as part of our business model that we had. And then we found out our leadership has decided that the external work that the lab was completing was a bit of a distraction from a lot of the internal projects we have going on. We received a large grant from the Lilly Foundation locally, and to invest in a big harvest festival, so a lot of staff time and effort will be on that. So effectively, soon we're finishing up a couple of projects, but the Newfields Lab is no longer an externally working entity. Our team just completes projects for Newfields. We're still hoping to obviously make these open source and share with the community, but we don't do contract work essentially. So we were very open with Mellon about that and communicated that we could still do the grant for the timeline, but not commit to the services at the end. So there were still a number of deliverables we could have accomplished, but without that the provision of services going forward, Mellon wasn't as interested. They're still open to the American Art Collaborative figuring out, going back to them and asking for funds, maybe massaging the project a little bit, finding a new principal investigator. But at this time, that path of inquiry is closed, at least for the Newfields lab to submit.
Yeah, and we, big we, should think about how, or if there are other opportunities for technical development, then yeah, we should discuss those as they come up. We had, of course, hoped that that Sammy and Newfields would be able to essentially be able to work on both of these projects in terms of the modelling and mapping side here and the technical side with the AAC, and everyone benefits. But it's great that Sammy can at least be, and Newfields in general, can be part of the work, even if not in that capacity. So yeah, put your thinking hats on, and we'll discuss this again. Kevin, could I take you briefly to talk about the AHRC grant?
Of course. So we put in a proposal on a pretty short order call from the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK, which went in early December. This was for what the AHRC referred to as a research network call, which is about the establishment really of a community of practice that will work together, and was targeted, it's what they call a highlight notice, on engaging with cultural heritage institutions and with a US-UK focus. It also had some elements of the call that target some technical elements, including linking up data from different cultural heritage institutions. So it seemed like a pretty good fit. The only thing being a bit of a fly in the ointment being the US-UK concentration in this particular call, which doesn't quite meet the membership of this group. One thing that might be worth noting is that there are some sort of heavy hints around this call that this might be part of a larger and longer piece of collaboration between UK funders and US funders. I think that would be the NSF and the NEH in the future. So it might be something we can build on. It was a really short timetable to get the call in. So several of you got some pretty out of the blue emails asking for letters of support. So many thanks for your input and help, because insert drum roll here, as of about 75 minutes ago, I actually got the notification that this has been recommended for funding.
Oh, great.
So it has all the usual caveats that we don't know exactly how much will have been funded, whether it'll be the full amount we put in for. It's for 1 year, but again, because it has a really short order start date, there was some words in the call which suggested they will be open-minded to a zero cost extension. So basically we put in for the maximum funding with the hope that if we got it, we'd be able to extend it at zero cost beyond the year if the funding council are happy to. It will provide travel funding for US and UK participants in the group, and I think we'll work with Rob to work out sort of who the best way to even out these different funding places from different partners. Obviously, having heard just a little over an hour ago, I don't know either the amount of total funding that we've actually been awarded, and I don't know the logistics of how that will work out in terms of getting people's travel funded for. It may be that we have, well, there will definitely be some forms that will go through Oxford. I don't know whether there'll be a preference here to go through our travel agency, but there will be a way and we'll work it out. And that's some good news.
Yep, fantastic news. Thank you. And thank you, HRC.
Yes, indeed.
So other grants in the pipeline, very briefly, because I recognise it's the top of the hour. The Getty Foundation has not officially agreed to pay anything, but is very open to discussion as to whether we can, a big institutional can top up on top of CREST and now AHRC. So The issue is that our director of the foundation has just retired, and there's an open job search for who's going to replace her. So I anticipate that there'll be some reluctance to put any significant changes into place while that search is ongoing. So now that we have HRC and CRES, if the Getty amount is under, I believe, 50,000, then we might also be able to slide in and just get it. At which point, hopefully, everyone would be paid for 100%, and no one would need to worry about travel. So I will keep you posted. And now that we've got the AHRC, that's sort of two things that we can take back to our foundation and say, you'll be joining in very good company by supporting us. Also, of course, there's, as Kristen mentioned, there are other Mellon Foundation grants that people are working on, or other sources of funding. So we hope that we will be able to get everything smoothed out. General plan of work, very quickly. First, we want to focus on the easy stuff to make some good progress. So focusing on people and objects. And then next after that, hopefully the provenance of objects is something which is very important and somewhat specific to art. And then see what else is of interest, perhaps bibliographies and so forth. And we'll do our absolute best to keep in alignment with the Sign Up CRM SIG. So both George and myself are part of that. Thomas, I believe, also. So as things come up in our work where the CRM is perhaps insufficient or complicated, I think we have a good set of people who are engaged with the core ontology to be able to get either changes or at least rationales. Face-to-face meeting, also extremely briefly, please set your calendars, March 4 to March 6 here in Los Angeles at the Getty. We've found the space, our event coordinator folks are happy with that. So unless something happens, and which is always possible, where a majority of people can't make it, that seems like we will have had enough discussions by then to be able to make some really good use of that face-to-face time in advancing the work. Oh, right. Anything else now that people think is important?
Rob, just a question about the face-to-face meeting, because that can always play a role when scheduling stuff. Are we talking about 3 full days, or would one of these days be the day?
Oh, yeah. I would expect that by halfway through the last day, we will have drawn so many diagrams on whiteboards and talked about P, X, and E, Y for so long that we will be well and truly burnt out. So I would anticipate 2.5 days, starting on March 4th, going through maybe just after lunch on the Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah, particularly useful for folks in traveling within the States. And you should be able to hopefully get back from LAX on the Wednesday rather than having to leave on Thursday. Great question. Thank you, Anton. Right. Apologies for going slightly over. And thank you everyone for the call. Thank you everyone for your participation. We'll have another call same time in 2 weeks' time. So that would be the 30th of January. I will hopefully speak to everyone then. And hopefully various political situations, both in the UK and US, will be clearer by then. All right, thanks everyone. We'll speak again soon.
Thanks.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing up, Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.